Thanks for tuning in. In this session, I want to talk to you about having a will versus having a living trust. What is a will? What is a living trust? Just trying to give you a little bit of idea as to what the difference is between the two. Who am I? I'm Emil Belvin. I'm a real estate broker here in Los Angeles and a probate specialist. So this type of stuff comes up quite a bit in the office. What's the difference between a will and a living trust? Well, both are pieces of paper. Both are words on paper. You know, a living trust, words on paper. A will, words on paper, right? But what happens with the living trust is that a living trust creates an entity, and the entity holds the assets, whereas the will just says how the estate should be dispersed and who's getting what and who's in charge of, you know, maybe administering the estate or who they would like to be in charge. Because if you have a will and probate is required, you know, because you have assets over a certain threshold or there's real property that needs to be dispersed, I often tell people if you have a will, it will go through probate. If you have a will and you have real property and assets over a certain amount, your will go through probate. Whereas your living trust, less likely to go through probate. Now the beauty of the living trust, again, is that it holds the assets. It creates an entity. Like your living trust, it can have its own tax ID number. Even when, let's say, you have real estate, you're not actually signing as the owner of the property anymore. You're signing as a successor trustee who's been appointed by the living trust. So the biggest difference between a will and a living trust is that the living trust creates an entity that holds the assets, whereas the will is paperwork stating how this person wanted their assets to be dispersed upon their passing. The living trust can have a lot of those things in it as well, in regards to the ideas of who should be the successor trustee and how things should go when the deceased passes. Absolutely, that will be in the living trust also. Don't get me wrong, but the biggest difference is that one creates an entity, and that entity holds the assets, and the other one is paperwork that just kind of gives a breakdown of how things should be dispersed. Fair enough? Kind of simplifying it. Also, if you have a will, it's likely, if you got real estate and assets over a certain amount, that it will go through probate. Whereas your living trust, more than most of the time, does not go through probate, because it appoints a person that has the legal capacity to make decisions, because they're appointed as the successor trustee per the entity. They can sign. It's already been kind of allocated as to who they are, what their role is upon the passing. Whereas the will, a lot of times, still has to go through probate, and then the judge has to approve what's in the will so that the person can be appointed as the PR over the estate. They can be the administrator, and they can take charge and sell the assets of the estate, so on and so forth. So that's the biggest difference. One creates an entity, one doesn't. One is likely to go through court, and one isn't. So hopefully that's been helpful. What is the difference between a will and a living trust? Kind of simplified it, giving you some less legal jargon. But if you wanted the actual legal definition, I can read it for you. It says a will is a written legal declaration by which a person names one or more persons to manage his or her estate. Note, a will likely go through probate. A living trust is a written legal document through which your assets are placed and then transferred to the designated beneficiaries at your death by your chosen representative, better known as a successor trustee. Fair enough? So gives you some insight, gives you some idea between the two. Hopefully that's been helpful. Who am I? I'm Emil Belvin. Again, I'm a real estate broker here in Los Angeles, as well as a probate specialist. So if there's any matters in regard to wills, trusts, or probate that I can assist you with, feel free to give me a call. My number is 310-670-3002. Again, this information is not intended to be legal advice. It's just information speaking in generalities to help you understand what the differences are between a will and a living trust. One is more of an entity, giving a breakdown of a few things. The other one's just a sheet of paper. Well, they both are sheets of paper. But one is a document that just kind of gives the desires of the deceased, whereas one actually creates an entity. And that's the biggest difference between the two. We're here in Los Angeles, and in my office, we work with several attorneys that help with these types of things. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Again, our number is 310-670-3002. I'll be happy to hear from you. You take care. Till next time, be well.